Hi, I'm Ginger from In Sheep's Clothing Yarn Shop in Torrington, Connecticut, here to welcome you to another episode of Focus on Fiber. Have you ever started a new project and noticed that the pattern requires use of a cast-on other than what you usually use? I'm sure you've wondered not only why, but how to use these different cast-ons. Today we're going to explore the reasons for them and exactly how to do them. So, my favorite cast-on that I normally do is called a long tail cast-on. It's also called the continental cast-on. And what you need to do with that is you need to make sure that you have a long enough tail to be able to put all your stitches on. So usually it's about an inch a stitch, so you can kind of keep that in mind. So what you need to do first is you need to do your you can't think of what I'm calling it here, my slip knot. Okay, and you want to use a slip knot. You don't want to just tie a knot on, because this is adjustable. You can make it looser, tighter. So now, to do the long tail cast on, we're going to have two tails. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my forefinger and my thumb, go in between the two strands. My three fingers are going to catch the bottom, the two strands, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop my needle down and open up my fingers like this. And then what I'll do is I'll go into the front of the thumb, over the forefinger, and then down through this thumb loop here. And then what I do is I bend my thumb and I pull down on the strand of yarn. And then my hand is already in position to start another stitch. So again, front of the thumb, over forefinger, and down through the thumb loop. Release my thumb and pull down. Now you want to make sure that you do this loose enough so that you can move the stitches back and forth easily on your needle. You don't want to do it too tight, otherwise obviously it's going to be very difficult to get your needle into that first stitch. So again, thumb, forefinger, down through the thumb loop, and pull my stitch down. And you want to make sure that you pull them down evenly. So thumb, forefinger, right down through that thumb loop. Release my thumb and pull it down. Already in place, so I'm ready to keep repeating this. Now the only thing with this is that you do need to make sure that you give yourself enough extra length on the on both strands. Otherwise you'll find yourself short when you come to the end of your cast on, and you're short a few stitches, and nothing's worse than that, because then you have to take it out, start all over again. So just a couple more for you to get the idea. So thumb, forefinger, down through the thumb loop, and pull down both the strands. Thumb, forefinger, down through the thumb loop, and pull stitches down. So that's your long tail cast on. So now I'll show you a different one. Now maybe a lot of you started out with the E-wrap cast on, and that's a very simple one where I'll put my slip knot on here, where you just take your thumb and you cast on off your thumb like that. So it's just like they call it E-wrap. Now the only problem with this is it's a nice easy one, but the only problem is when you go to knit, quite often you end up stretching out your stitches and you don't have a really nice stable base, and if you drop one stitch you have to start all over again because it's impossible to try to pick it up again. And quite often when you go to knit you just don't get a nice cast on. It is handy for certain things, like say that you're already knitting and they'll say cast on like an extra stitch. It's so easy just to thumb loop an extra stitch onto that. You can also cable cast on, which I'll actually show you how to do that too. So again, we're going to, so most of the other ones you just need a short tail to start and do your slip knot. So say that you want to do a knitted on cast on. So I'll take my second needle, and then what I'll do is I'm going to put my needle through that first stitch that's on the needle, wrap my yarn around, and just simply knit through that loop. And then what I'll do is, oops, I'll put it on to my needle. So that starts my stitch. Let me just be able to see what I'm doing here. Okay, so now knitted on, cast on. So again, we just like you're going to knit, put your needle through the needle, wrap the yarn around, pull the stitch through, and then onto your needle. Through the front of the stitch, wrap around, and you notice I'm using my finger just to push my needle. And you want to put it on from the back, like that. Right through the front, wrap around, and you want to make sure that you pull it up loose enough so that your stitch isn't super tight, because you want to go back through that same stitch again. And like anything, these take a little bit of practice. You just keep, there we go. After you've done a few cast-ons like this, you'll start to get really good at it. I'll cast that back on. So there you go. There's your knitted cast-on. Now, another cast-on is called the cable cast-on, and it's very similar to this one. Again, we start with our slip knot. There we go. Okay, and then we'll knit our first stitch on like we did before. Get that onto our needle. Okay, now, instead of going through that first stitch, what we're going to do is put our needle through those two stitches. And then with our yarn, we're going to pull up a stitch. Put it onto our needle. And again, you want to leave it on the looser side. And we'll put our needle again right through those two stitches, as opposed to through the front of that first stitch. So we're going right through those two stitches. Wrap our yarn around and put it onto the needle. Right through those two stitches, catch your yarn, pull it through, and onto the needle. Now I'm doing it continental style, so for those of you that are not casting on continental, put your needle through, and then with your right hand just wrap the yarn around your needle, pull it through, and onto your needle. Pull it through, and onto your needle. Oops, I caught something. There we go. And onto our needle. So that's the cable cast on. Again, gives you a nice cast on, gives you a nice stable base. Because sometimes when you go, this was the thing about the E-wrap, is that when you put that onto your needle, I'll just show you, you can see the difference between the cast-ons. See how that's just right on top of the needle, and this one you have more of a base on your needle. And sometimes I know when I'm teaching beginner knitters, and this is the cast-on they're trying to use, well, usually I try to teach them a different cast-on. But you just have to be very careful, because as you're knitting, this wants to just stretch out. You can see that right there? So when I go to knit, so you have to be very careful. And as a beginner knitter, sometimes that's really hard. So see the big space there? And I'm just going to knit this one here, and then the last one. See how it really stretches out? There we go. So there's that cast on. It doesn't, well, I'm going to knit across this one so you can see the difference between these. And again, I'm knitting continental, which means my yarn is in my left hand. And for those of you that don't, we'll knit this way. Go. Get that last stitch. Okay. So now you can see the difference between, see, I have a nice stable row of stitches there, and here, little stretchy, doesn't really look quite as good. So that's why we kind of opt out of the E cast on. Okay, so that was that. Let's see, what other cast-ons can we do? There are so many of them. Another cast-on that you can do, which I think is a really cool one, is the ribbed cast-on, which gives you this nice, stretchy ribbing. And the cast-on, it stretches right along with your rib so that you don't have that really, you know, a strong cast-on that's going to bind and not stretch. So what we'll do first is we put our slip knot on, and then we're going to knit a stitch on. And put that on the needle. And then we're going to go in through the back of our stitch and knit. Oh, first we have to pull it through. There we go. Okay, just lost those stitches. Let me just, this yarn's a little bit frayed. Let me just start with another slip knot. Okay, and then knit on another stitch. And put it on our needle. Okay, so now what we're going to do for our knit, for what will be the knit stitch in the rib, is go in through the back. First we want to catch the yarn over like that. Go in through the back, and then knit it, and then put it on our needle. And now we'll go in through the front. There we go, and knit that. There we go, put that on the needle, and then catch our yarn, and then go in through the back and go in through between those two stitches. My yarn is really splitting here. There we go. Okay, and then knit. And then put that on the needle. And then again go through the front. So you're just doing every other. There we go. Knit that. And then go through from the back. And then knit. There we go. Once you get into a rhythm, and then go through the back like that, and then go through those stitches from the back, and I'll show you just a second here. You can almost see how you'll have the knit and the purl. You have an elongated stitch every other. One recedes back, one's in the front, one recedes back, one's in the front. Just like that. And then whatever you ended with, let's see. So I'm going to go through the front and knit it, put it on the needle, and then go through and knit. So I'm ending with a knit stitch. I'm trying to anyway. Here we go. There we go. So we'll end with a knit stitch. There we go. So whatever I ended with is what I'm going to start with. So I'm going to knit that stitch. And then purl my next stitch. Knit the next one. You can see how it's elongated. Knit that stitch. Purl the receding stitch. Knit the next stitch. Purl. Knit the next stitch. Purl. Knit. And going to end with a purl stitch. And then I'll knit it, I'll work another row so that you can really see how it's starting out here. So I'm going to start with a knit. There we go. Okay, so knit. And then there's my purl. And then see, there's my knit stitch right there. So knit, purl. There again is my knit. So it just lines up really, really nicely for you. There's my knit, there's my purl, there's my knit, and there's my purl. And it gives you that beautiful, stretchy little rib cast on. That is so nice. So if you're doing a hat, this would be a perfect cast on for it. So there we go. So there's our knit. My yarn is splitting on me. Okay, purl, just so you can see. And there again, it's lining up really nicely with the bottom. And then my purl, knit, purl, knit. So no binding on your bind off when you do this nice little ribbed cast on. So there's that one. And then I have a couple more little cast-ons that are nice ones too. And these would require a crochet hook. So what you can do, one is going to be a crocheted cast-on right to your needle. And then the next one is taking that same crochet cast-on and making it a provisional cast-on. So first off, I guess I'm going to need these. First off, so we'll do our slip knot. Okay. And then what we're going to do is, whoops, a minute. Actually, we need to put the slip knot onto our crochet hook first. Then we're going to put our needle over our yarn, and we're going to wrap over and do a single crochet or a chain. Then what we do is we take our yarn, which is now on top of the needle, we're going to move it underneath so that again we can catch the yarn and chain. Take our yarn, move it back underneath the needle, and do a chain. Back underneath the needle and do a chain. Underneath and do a chain. So if you really look at it, you can see how the chain stitch is right underneath the needle, but it's creating a nice little cast on for your needle. Again, crochet. You always have to move it to the back of your knitting needle. So then the yarn will come up over your needle and then draw it through your chain, your slip knot there. Underneath the needle, over, and chain. And then when you're ready to knit, when you have all the stitches that you need on your needle, you're going to take your yarn, put it to the back, take that last stitch that's on your crochet hook and slip it onto the needle. There's your nice little cast on. And you can go ahead and knit. There you go. Now also you want to, depending on what crochet hook that you use, you don't want to use something too big, and you don't want to use something that's too tight. So you need to find, you know, an appropriate crochet hook that will match your needle too. So this makes a nice little cast on. Now, if you want to do the same thing, but this time, sometimes you want a provisional cast on. And a provisional cast on is when, say, you're doing lace. And you need to keep the stitches open so that you want to graft them together with, say you're doing a cowl. And you want to be able to take those stitches and join them, the beginning stitches to the end stitches to make your cowl, but you don't want to sew them. Say that you have a pattern stitch and you want to Kitchener them together. You need a provisional cast on to start with that. And an easy way to do that is to do a provisional cast on. One way of doing crocheted provisional cast on is to simply create a chain. So I'm just going to chain some stitches. Okay. And then what you do is, so you have your nice little chain there. What you want to do is you want to flip it over, and I'm just going to put this through so it doesn't come undone on us. There we go. And take your needle and you're going to go into the bump underneath, and I'll take a different yarn so you can see what I'm doing here. Like that. And you'll pull up a loop for each one of those bumps that you have underneath. And draw up a loop. Okay. Go into the other bump and draw up a loop. Draw up a loop. And you'll do that all the way across for as many stitches as you want. You want to make sure that you chain a couple extra just so that you have them. And then when you're, so then you continue your knitting, and when you're done, you'll just unchain, you'll just release your stitches and it'll unchain, and then you'll have live stitches to join to your other live stitches to Kitchener them together. So you can just release those. And then that will give you the live stitches on your needle. So that's one way of doing it. And then the other way is, let's see, to do like what we did before, is just to chain over our needle like this. Okay, make sure you put it underneath the needle, chain underneath the needle. Oops, not catching your crochet hook. Chain underneath the needle, chain underneath the needle. And then what you do when you get to the end, let's see how much yarn I have here. Underneath, whoops, like that. And I think this is a very clever way to do it, is when you get to the end, you're just going to leave yourself a tail like that, and then take your new yarn that you want to knit with, this one here, and just start knitting into the crocheted stitches onto your needle like this. I used to think doing a provisional cast on was so hard, and it's not. Once you have one or two that you can refer to, especially with the crochet hook, I really like that one. Provisional cast-ons are just a piece of cake. So now I have my knitting, and I'm going to keep knitting, but when I get to the end, all I have to do is release this, and it's going to unchain. Of course, we would have knit, and all this would be knitted, and it wouldn't make these loops on here, but it would undo all the stitches, and it would leave you your live knitting onto the needle. So that's just a very clever way to do a provisional cast on. So, and there's lots more ways to cast on, and these are just a few of the highlights, some of the better known ones. So there you go. I hope that you will find the right cast on for the right project. And I hope that giving you some of these that we've done will you'll give them a try. So please remember to keep a focus on fiber, and we'll see you the next time.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.